Florida does more prescribed burning than all the other states combined, and a lot of people don't understand that. And so to understand why that is to better understand not only the agencies that burn, and if you ask them, what do you burn, you may hear such things such, well, we do fuel reduction if they're in the Forest Service or forest health, or if you're in the Wildlife Service, we'll do it for wildlife habitat or ecological restoration. The beauty of fire is no matter what you burn, you get all those benefits. But to better understand why we burn is better understand why Florida burns and how it developed into being such a burning environment. So first of all, let's go back to that. And let's talk about when Florida first came out of the oceans, when the oceans started receding and the landmass began. And so you have a peninsula between two large bodies of water, what we refer to now as the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. And it's located in a temperate zone. And if you look at those same similarities around the world, these are the lightning capitals of their continents, such as Florida. There's more lightning in Florida than the rest of North America. Florida's average thunderstorm, summer thunderstorm, produces over 3,500 lightning strikes, over 285 lightning strikes per square mile. So if you start doing the numbers, that's one lightning strike between every 2 to 3 acres. That's a lot of lightning strikes. That's a lot of ignition points. So let's think about that. That was already happening on a landmass. And then now the seed source come in, the plants. So they had to develop either being dependent upon or very tolerant of fire. And so this is how Florida developed and how the plant life became dependent upon fire. The longleaf pine is very tolerant of fire because it has a very thick bark. So as long as the fire continued to burn and you didn't have organics built up around it that would girdle it, it could withstand fire, and many other trees could too. The palmettos that we have right behind us here, that's another plant that is developed on fire. When we are burning and the fire is approaching a palmetto, right before the flame gets there and it gets that higher temperature on it, the leaf becomes wet because within its chemistry, it has these volatile oils, and these oils will then ignite and actually create it to burn very quickly. So you just watch them, and just within seconds beforehand, the plant looks wet. And so it's just interesting to see, and it catches on fire, and then it burns it quickly down, and then it'll resprout the buds at the base again. But it brings that level of that palmetto down as long as it regularly burns. So what transpires? Well, plant communities are not stagnant. Every year, they regenerate. So you've got new growth coming on and old growth coming off. So it does this. And it would do this again the next year, and the next year after that. Now remember the natural landscape burns? They would start cleaning it right back off, putting the potash back on, having it clean and green again, clean and green. The Spaniards saw this Florida, and just, they saw the flowers, but they also saw this vivid greenness, because if you've ever looked right after a burn, it is just bright green compared to something that's been now 3 or more years old, a little duller, not quite as vivid. But now the fire's not coming through again, so it keeps building up, and then you start getting shrubs coming up through it. And so now being draping over the branches and beginning to have what we call ladder fuels. The shrubs are getting bigger, and they're going on up. And the next thing you know, we've got all this vegetation up with this litter draped in it, right up to the branches of the overstory. And now we can have what we call a catastrophic fire, because there's these, what we refer to as ladder fuels, that get up into the crown of the tree and carry it. And then these are now then not cleansing the forest, but burning the forest. So this is what was transpiring. So we all think about forest, we think about trees. Well, the trees are only about 10% of a healthy forest system. 90% or more of the diversity of a forest is from about here down. Your herbaceous grasses, your wildflowers, your grasshoppers, your beginning of your food cycles. This is what you want to see in a healthy forest that gets regenerated through extra regular fire regime. You go to the doctor, what do? They take your weight, they take your blood pressure, they take your pulse, your temperature, might get an EKG done. They're taking all the things they need to know if you've got any ailments, what do we need to do to address that? We can't do that without knowing the specifics of your body. So writing a prescription to burn a property is a very similar process. We take a lot of considerations. So there's 3 elements that are needed for fire. Anybody remember what those 3 elements are? Air, heat, and fuel. Those are your 3 elements. So we don't have a valve out here that we can adjust the air, do we? Can't do that. And after 45 years of hot summers, let me tell you, I haven't found a tree yet that had the thermostat on the back that I can adjust the heat. So we still have that. The one thing that we can control is fuel, or the plant communities. And so that's how we end up approaching this. So let me tell you a little bit what goes into consideration of writing a prescription. First of all, we look at the location of the unit we want to burn and its size. If it hasn't had fire in over a decade, then it's going to be a smaller size we're going to tackle. And where it is in its location and proximity to not what we're burning, but what's surrounding it. So first of all, we do what's called smoke screening, because where there's fire, there's smoke. And so you need to consider highways. And so we do a cone completely around us, just in case there's a wind shift, but we also do what's supposed to be our predominant wind feature, and we do a cone. So think about the hurricanes, where they do a cone like that. We do the same, because you're not going to have a wind like this. You're going to have a wind that does this. And so we take all that into consideration. The next thing that we think about in our smoke screening is what is that smoke going to impact? Is there hospitals? Is there nursing homes? Anything with respiratory concerns that we want to think about. So we take all these things into consideration, and then we factor in what is within that unit. How long has it burned since it's burned? So what are your components of your plant vegetation? What type of plants are there? So what is their fire behavior going to be based on that? And as we've progressed in this, it's just like you see on the weather station. We've now used, once we had computers, developed models. And so there's models that we use. We have one that's called Behave. It's a fire model that we put all these concerns in, and it kicks us back and tells us this is what your fire height's going to be, what your fire lengths are going to be based on everything you factored in. And when you do this enough times, it gets to be pretty accurate.